Hi, this is Chris with Orange Coast College's Art Department, showing how to light a sphere using Photoshop and the soft round brush. So this is the type of thing that we want to do, and hopefully you're familiar with. This is the sphere when it's lit and all its parts, from center light, highlight, halftone, core shadow, reflected light, occlusion shadow, and cast shadow. And this is a pencil sketch. So what we're going to do is do something a little bit more photoreal using the soft round brush in Photoshop. So let me turn this guy off and show you where we're starting. So this is a regular 4K UHD file, and I'm going to start off with just first giving myself a medium gray, and I'm filling with my foreground color by hitting Option Delete. And this is kind of giving me the sort of standard default gray background. Now I want to sort of set the scene a little bit, so I'm going to zoom out where I can put in a little bit of a gradient backdrop. So first of all, I'm going to select the brush tool, and I'm going to make it really big. So I'm holding down Control and Option on my Mac keyboard, and I can go right to left to change the diameter. So I want something super big like this. And I'm going to choose a pretty dark gray so it really recedes in the background. So let's see how this looks. I'm also going to hold down Shift so I have a perfectly horizontal stroke. So that's what you might think of a linear gradient, but I'm using the soft round brush because it will give me that with one stroke. And maybe I'll go a little bit darker, and I'll do one more stroke up high because I just thought I'd darken that top up a little bit. And then perhaps I'm using Option right now to sample. So Option clicking, I'm going to go back to that first gray and make it just a little bit brighter. And I'm going to shrink my brush size down a little bit and come by along the front. And that's a pretty good gradient. So this is just made with the brush tool. I know I could do it with the gradient tool as well, but it allows me a little bit of opportunity to finesse it. So that's my background. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see it. I don't need to zoom out as much anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the round marquee tool. I'm going to hold down Shift so that it makes a perfect circle. And I'm going to make the size of my sphere. So maybe something like that. And I'm just going to fill it with whatever color I've got for now. So Option Delete. And here's my sphere, and actually that's a flat gray, it's not a gradient, it just seems like it because it's on top of a gradient. And I'm going to lock the transparency now. So on my layers palette I'm going to lock transparency, and that way I can paint on top of this freely. Next thing I need to do is decide where my light source is coming from. I'm going to pick the upper left, sort of our default light source when we don't have anything else in mind. And so that means I'm going to have a shadow running out to the right side, so I'll move my sphere over a little bit. Move it over to about maybe here. That gives me a little room to run a shadow out later. So there's many, many ways to do this. There's no one right way, everything else is wrong. But we want to use the soft round brush in this exercise. So I'm going to fill this circle with what I would consider the shadow core color. And since I'm in my brush tool, I can now start sampling from the background. I can sample any of these colors here. I don't have to go to my color picker. So I'm going to get like this dark gray up top. That might be a good shadow core. So I'm going to now fill my circle with that color, and that is the darkest part of my circle. Now I'm going to go down here. I think I'll sample my lightest gray, maybe even go a little bit lighter than that. And I'm going to make my brush even bigger here. And I'm just gonna like one click this and see how it comes out. Maybe a little bit lighter than that. So, and maybe I'll hold it down a little bit more. All right. So, looking pretty good. Maybe it wants one more shot with it. Now, that's sort of the center light. I'm going to click again a couple times. That's starting to look pretty good. Now I want to get some reflected light, just some of the light that's coming in through my space, so it's not the main light source. So I'm going to lower the size of my, and I'm going to go mostly outside of my circle. That's probably a bit too much. Let me come on back, just sort of touch this up. And this is just an opportunity for you to finesse. We're going to bounce a little light in off the ground here. A little bit too much. And this is all just done by feel. So you decide how much ambient light is in your space, how much is being reflected off the ground. And you'll see I'm sort of chipping away at that shadow core. That's a bit much. But reflected light is the thing that really makes things look 3D. All right, I've got my center light, I've got reflected light. Let's go ahead and put in a little highlight. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter with my foreground color and then size my brush down a little bit and try to get the spot on the sphere where I would see the reflection of my light source. So how about right about there? Maybe a little bit brighter and a little bit bigger. All right, it looks like I'm seeing the reflection of the light. And that's most of the light that I need. Now let's think about shadow. I'm going to add a new layer below my sphere layer. Get my round marquee tool, and I'm going to not hold down shift this time. I'm just going to run out an ellipse that's about the size that the shadow would be. I can move this ellipse. And one thing I want to do, I want to have a little bit of a feathered edge on it. So the edge isn't super crisp. So I'm going to go to select, modify, feather, and I'll do this maybe 10 pixels. And let's find a pretty dark gray. And then I'm going to fill that selection and deselect. And now you can kind of see that my light, because I've got a bit of a feathered edge, I don't have a perfect light source like the sun. It's more like an interior light. And so there's a little bit of fuzziness around the edge. And I can use the move tool here and just kind of get it where I want. About right there. And then I'm going to go lock the transparency in my layers palette. Now I can paint into the shadow as much as I want. So I'm going to go and select a darker, and so here we are pretty much black, and I'm going to put in my occlusion shadow. So I'm going to make it even darker right underneath my sphere. So this is where it's really hard to get some light in. And I'm going to bring it out a little bit. And then as you get a little further away, we get a little bit more light into that shadow. And now this makes the bottom of the sphere look a little odd. So I want to get some occlusion shadow on the bottom of the sphere. So I'm going to change layers, go up on that, make my brush pretty small here, and just kind of get into the crevices here. So I'm in really just where the sphere is hitting the ground plane, and I'm darkening that up a little bit. Because it's just hard to get light in down there. And I'm getting a bit of a lost edge. So where the ball is actually hitting the surface, it's getting a lost edge in that occlusion shadow. And that's about it. This now has all my parts to it. I've got highlight, center light, halftone, core shadow, reflected light, occlusion shadow, cast shadow. So all my major elements from here, you can now see. In my sphere. All right, now it's your turn. Have some fun, goof around. Don't be afraid to make that brush really big and only use part of it. You don't have to get your whole brush into your shape. You can just kind of use the edge of the brush. So have some fun and explore. Good luck.